All right, so this is the Coexist podcast, and I'm here today with Paul Willis. We talk to creatives in Pan Africa, and we just want to, support the art and listen to what he's currently doing and his current journey to where he's at today. So, you want to
Thank you
introduce
so much for
yourself?
having me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so excited to join you for this podcast. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm ready to just like dive right in. Where you want to start?
Well, usually we start with just your background, maybe some personal things you want
Yeah,
to share that got you to where you are today and that got you into the arts.
yeah, we can do that for sure. For those folks who may not know, my name is Paul Willis. I am a hip hop and spoken word artist right now based in Sacramento, California. And during the day, I also do kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. My family's Jamaican, so I have many jobs. um,
I understand that. Me too. I mean, I'm Caribbean.
and I'm not originally from Sacramento. I think that could be a cool place to start. Um,
Okay.
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. And, my grandmother, my mom, my oldest sister are all born in Kingston, Jamaica. My grandmother studied nursing at Oxford in England before practicing here at the Children's Hospital in Boston. And my grandmother really raised most of us, all of us. My two older sisters. I have an older brother. There's me, my little sister. My grandmother really brought us up. My mom was addicted to drugs and alcohol. I was born in 1987, so it was like the height of the crack cocaine era. She just struggled with addiction for decades of her life. So we didn't have like the greatest of relationships growing up. But what my grandmother really stressed to us growing up was that education was something that was really important, because that's something that once you have it, once you know, like people can't take that knowledge away from you, right? And then giving back to the community. So I think that's really what's kind of governed my artistic journey and my career path, was those early like foundational things with my grandma, and growing up in this like Jamaican household that was all about just like having faith, right? My grandmother was a minister in the church,
Mhm.
and giving back to your community, knowing that was important, knowing that your education stuff was important. So I think that those were the kind of building blocks
Yeah.
for me. And then, I lived a life in high school where I went to a private boarding school in New England, which was like really expensive and this
So
like
did you get
predominantly
to
white
just see like
institution. All this stuff.
a different lifestyle?
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird for me as a teenager because my family was like still, and like going away to private school was where we were wearing like suits and ties and all that kind of stuff every day was different, and kind of learning how to navigate that space to be successful in that space, and then coming home and having this whole different set of skills to just learning how to be like the man of the house, having to kind of be one of the like moral backbones in my family. There are a lot of times where we could have went like left, or this really kind of crazy or bad direction, and there were times where I had to like step up and do things that like kids weren't supposed to do, right? In order to make
Right.
sure that we were, we had food, and we were safe, and that we were looking out for each other and all that kind of stuff. My older brother, even though he's the oldest like male in the house, he's not confrontational at all. And
Mm.
my two older sisters were still in college when I was when I was a young person, and um, they weren't trying to kind of ruin that opportunity, right? To like finish their degree and then
Right.
like really change the trajectory of their lives, and then ours as well, right? Because of that. So, there were a lot of crazy summers and winter breaks that were in there in my teenage years, and
Is
people
any
get
of
to,
that like do you see any of that like show up in your art or your music? And
yeah, it's showing up now. which is, I mean, I think I've always written about my life, but one of the things that I think was really interesting for people here in Sacramento was when I moved out here, I was like, I probably seemed like this fully formed adult, and I was rapping about all this conscious stuff about community issues. So I think people thought that I might have been this like perfect persona, right? Or this person who just got like was woke out the womb, and then I showed up and this is how I rap. I was like, that's actually not the case. There was a lot of like trauma and hurt and pain that brought me to this point where I realized that there were certain things that I wanted out of my life and out of the lives for other people. So then I think as my career progressed as an artist, I started to share more and more of that. And the latest album I just dropped, Wonderland, is an exploration of those stories to give people really like, these are the things I went through to get to where I'm at now. So when people kind of go through the catalog, it kind of gets like deeper and deeper, and you're just like peeling off layers of the onion, and you get to this point. I feel like people can even return back to the start to kind of see like, okay, so he went through that. So when he came out here and he was talking this stuff, there's a huge kind of personal journey behind that. But yeah, so it manifests itself now, but in that way. But I think that at the time, I didn't have a lot of language for it. Being a teenager, I couldn't tell you what trauma was. I didn't understand. I just knew that things felt bad, or that I was angry or hurt and all that stuff, but I couldn't have told you what these things were linked to or how to explain stuff. So
now that it's kind of come up, is there a message that you got yourself when you were maybe putting it out there, and then that you want other people to kind of get from it as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that there's really a world of possibilities that are out there that exist, and it's really on you to understand that even if you can't see it or like physically like grasp it, to still know that there is more, right? I think as kids who grew up in like low income communities and places like that, it's hard to see life outside the neighborhood. Like I never thought I'd leave Boston. I never thought I'd be in California or doing some of the things that I'm doing. I couldn't imagine that stuff. So I really want people to give themselves permission to just dream big and to think about their goals and to multiply that and to really just reach for the things that they think are impossible, because they're actually probably closer than you really know.
Yeah, no, I think just what you said, like that's really like such a big thing. I think maybe this current generation, they call like Gen Z, I feel like they're getting that because they've seen people do the typical, job or do what everyone else tells you, and they're like, that's not working. And so they're just doing what they want to do, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, and I think that this generation has more access than ever before, right? Like, I grew up with the internet, right? Like, we had the little AOL CDs and the dial-up.
I still remember dial-up. I mean that mid millennial generation.
That was we grew up with that and these developments. I didn't own a cell phone until I was 19.
Wow, yeah.
And there are babies now with their own phones, like, going to first to second grade. Like, I got my cell phone to call my mom in case of an emergency, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. You know what I mean? Like, there have been some really wild emergencies, like school shootings and crazy stuff. So I get it, but it's such a different world now because in the palm of their hands, they can connect with people all over the world, and they can hear stories and information. And it's become so hard to discern. I think that's their challenge, right? Is when you're flooded with so much information, how can you tell what's real, what's not real? Who's a trusted source and who isn't?
How do
Whereas,
you necessarily kind of hone in on this is what I'm going to focus on, and maybe I'm not going to watch or listen to everything, but these are the things that I know I need to like be on point with and listen
yeah,
to, be a
I
part of.
mean, I think when we were growing up, it was, we had to really fact check the internet. Like we couldn't just Google something and like say that this website came up, and because
Right.
this website exists, that means it's real,
Still have
right?
the
So I think we
encyclopedia.
grew up, yeah, like we grew up, I think, being skeptical of the internet to begin with.
Right.
And then we saw it could be this like really powerful tool, but that skepticism I think was always there, as opposed to, and it's because we had other things, like we had encyclopedias, we had elders, like our world was connected with reality in a way that youngsters today, they don't know a world that's like not been tethered to the cell phone,
Right.
you know so I think that's what it's been, is I can I think I'm able to see when people are telling the truth, when they're not telling the truth, because I really kind of look at arguments in people's writing and what they're saying, and if those things are consistent, you
Right.
know, because growing up, you could see somebody talk a good game, but there might be other ways that they might prove that they're not actually who they say they are, you know. Whereas today it's a lot easier to hide behind a social media feed that's like carefully crafted and curated and all that kind of stuff. So, I think it's a generational thing, but I think I had great mentors in my life, and just that, like, always being skeptical of the internet was just a thing that I grew up with.
Yeah. I think Shay hopped on. I feel like on it though. Hey
Hi.
Shay.
Hi.
Hey, what's up?
Okay, I can hear you guys. Nothing much. Okay, so I'm thinking we could do these questions before the Wi-Fi jumps me off. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, she's gonna do like
The Wi-Fi will automatically jump me off.
so I guess the first one is what is something maybe we would just do a sentence of we would want to tell young creatives.
You um man, just one sentence.
Okay, take your time. Sorry.
Okay. I would tell young creatives to not box their own thinking in. Um, yeah, just don't limit yourselves into what you think is possible. Um, Collaborate freely, create freely, and just experiment. Try a whole bunch of different stuff. See what works for you, and then go with that.
Yeah, awesome. Shay.
Okay, your perfect day as an artist. If there was a such thing as a perfect day.
Good question. I'd wake up at like 10 a.m. I would eat brunch and then go to the studio, because I like to record in the early afternoon. I am not like a night owl in the studio. So probably from like noon till about 4 or 5, I want to be in the studio all afternoon, collaborating, working, mixing, mastering, whatever that is. And then I would want to take any of the people who I love to create with out to eat for dinner. I know I'm skipping lunch, but that's because I slept in, and we did the brunch thing. But I'd love to be able to kind of sit and connect with creatives over dinner, to be able to talk about their projects, their dreams, and then work to kind of connect people with the resources to make that stuff happen. And then kind of pause dinner around 8 or 9, kind of head home so I could read and write and kind of be in my own thoughts. So I'm not one of those folks that likes to be up to like 2 or 3 in the morning just creating, even though sometimes I find myself doing that. But I would prefer, in the perfect situation, to do that during the day, and make that like part of what I do.
Cool. Who are you currently listening to?
So many good artists. Oompa.
Okay.
She's a rapper from Boston, and is phenomenal. Vel the Wonder, who's just, her album Trophy Wife is incredible. She just goes so crazy with it. Another artist, his name is Radamiz. He's from Brooklyn. He's like one of the most skilled rappers out right now. Rhapsody, I listen to Rhapsody a lot. She's incredible too.
Okay.
And I guess myself. I listen to a lot of my.
What is one of your favorite songs or pieces?
This song called Dudley.
Dudley.
It's a song I just released on Wonderland, and there's like a beat switch in like the middle where the drums change up and just goes crazy after that. But I've got 3 backup singers with me. It's like a funky kind of 70s Shaft hip hop kind of vibe, and it's a good time.
Did you send it to me? I could play it.
I might have.
Shay, do you have a question or?
Oh, I should have called you before we did this, huh? Because I have a question, but I feel like you should drop the beat. Like now, I'm curious about the beat. You know,
yeah.
About the song. I was gonna ask you if you could spit a lyric.
Oh, from Dudley?
Anything.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this piece that goes hard times of sacrifice, trying to stay alive. I survived to seeing my hood gentrify. Used to ride down to Dudley at 5:45, read the news, wipe the cold from my eye. I used to wonder what I could be. Sis was Ivy League, and my bro was enrolled in the streets. Trying to honor roll, my friends knocked off like dominoes. The father knows it's the agony in defeat. What is hope when you're a statistic? I was told you could dream if you listen. Every summer another person went missing. Could have been in a grave to serve the sentence. But if Malcolm ran these streets and his name on them, then I know I can do my thing on them. So as long as the sun shines on me every morning, I can give the world a fair warning. So don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. That's fun. Okay, it's fun. I got like backup singers.
Can you describe Curtis Blow for all the youngins out there?
Yeah, exactly. gotta weave in that hip hop history and let them know that, you know, this culture is gonna outlive us all. So.
I was suspended in 7th grade. The road ain't always paved in gold. I couldn't save my soul. Adrenaline like a tidal wave. Might have thrown it all away. Carrie begged me to stay. Your mama ain't coming home. Don't pick up the phone. You got to set her straight. But I'm 15. Just begun to dream. Life ain't. It ain't what you prefer. Is this the meaning of a dream deferred? Is this what we mean to hurt? My grandma was sick, went to court, no resource to judge for this. Of course, I was trapped in the middle of Central. Latin should have made me mental. I paid enough, good as hell I went through, so I forced their hands and forced the issue. Every summer was wild. No less of a man than a fatherless child. My mother always had me on trial. Thank the Lord, my rap sheet was clean. My brother shared the backseat with me. Shout out Ralph, that rap beat was clean. I know I can't drop the month later. I'm stumped, thinking I could be much greater if I want. Summer before was when I got jumped. Area 4 for pump, dribbling dunk. I was born back then. I was young, could've had a gun, chose not to run. Two older niggas beating down on one just to start, kept me from jail. Gave Ace 300 for bail. He wanted me to tip the scale and live to tell the tale.
Yeah, that was fire.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stop sharing. Okay, for sure. Yeah, people gotta go listen to Dudley and Wonderland. So it seemed like that was done live. Where were you guys at?
Mhm.
Where were you? Where was the band?
We were at this Airbnb in Midtown, and we had to be outside. So in the video, like you'll be able to see a little bit that we were like socially distanced and all of that to make it work. But we were actually recording for the Wonderland film that incorporated, live music performances and spoken word poetry and dance and these community interviews about gentrification and home and how communities kind of shift and change over time. Because I saw that with my neighborhood back home in Boston, and that's what's happening right now in Sacramento. It's like a really big issue.
What's your viewpoint on gentrification?
I know that cities grow and change over time. It's just like one of those facts. But I think that when it's done without the people who are most impacted in mind, then it can be a really harmful experience. There have been so many things systematically that have led to communities of color to distrust the current systems. And the FHA is, one of those forces that denied a lot of people of color the opportunity to move into the suburbs and wealthier neighborhoods. Even after they came back from the war, even if they were college educated, they weren't allowed to move out of certain inner city neighborhoods. So, you started to see this like really intense just segregation of people. And while they couldn't legally do it by race, they used other means. So like housing was one of those ways, education was another one of those ways, transportation, healthcare. And you see how those institutions still have lasting impacts to how our communities live and work today. So the CV Circle community in Sacramento is another one of those communities that, there used to be Jewish people who lived there. There used to be all sorts of people who lived there, who then had the opportunity to kind of move out of the neighborhood. Project housing was never meant to be permanent, but because of these racist policies from the city, the county, and the federal government, it made it so that Black and brown people could never leave those places. So, that's kind of my take on it. It's just, it's really harmful, and I think that those policies need to be shifted when we get people who look like us, who come from those neighborhoods and communities, to represent us in political spaces, to really kind of transform what the policy looks like. Racist policy doesn't always have to be that way, right? Like it can be redesigned. It just takes a lot, because we're not always able to change the conditions without removing all the actors in the system first. So I think for us, it's let's get our own people elected, and then let's do the things to protect our community from racism and other institutional forces.
Yeah. Get it from Shay.
Well, I don't want to stray from like the political conversation too much, My question
go there.
would be,
I'm with it. Let's
what
go.
should my question would be, what do you feel young people? There's so many issues, What do you feel like young people should focus?
Yeah. What are some of the issues that young people should focus on? An issue for young people is their education. And the reason why I say that is because, they're being force-fed curriculum and a history that isn't accurate to their experiences. And because of that, they're being force-fed these myths about America and our government and just how great, right? And I put that in quotation marks for people who can't see that, how great this country actually is, and it's not, and it hasn't been great for everybody. And I think that if we can start there, if we can start demystifying American mythology and legends, then we can actually move to this place where we can reach kind of greater equity and justice. But we can't do that if we don't think that there's something wrong. And there's so many adults who don't have a social justice conversation until they're in the workplace, or until, you know, they're forced to encounter somebody who doesn't look like them. And oftentimes that's maybe it's college, but oftentimes it's like in the working world or in the political world. And I think that that's where I think young people can impact folks the most. As much as, you know, marching and being out in the streets is important, you know, that's cool, but that's a demonstration, right? Yeah. That's not the work of organizing behind the scenes, getting people educated, and then getting them mobilized to really move on things. But that requires a sort of radical shift away from the kind of education that young people are receiving right now. There's a lot of stuff that I learned outside of school.
So what direction do you think that young people should focus on for their education? Like, where should they be getting it, or what sources should they be looking to?
Yeah, I think as a hip hop head, it starts with knowledge itself, right? So know who you are, know your family story, know your people's story. Where do they come from? You know, Black, what's Black and what's white? You know, that idea of race has been socially constructed, right? So the only way to deconstruct that is to go backwards into your own history to really figure out where your people came from. And unfortunately for people who are Black, if you don't know who your ancestors are, you've been disconnected through slavery and through so many oppressive forces in this country. And that's been done intentionally, right? Whereas white people can go back and look at generations upon generations of their family history, because that's been uninterrupted. And yeah, so that's where I think they should start.
In ruining others. So,
yeah.
I mean. Yeah.
And, you know, again, it's not like you can control what your ancestors did, but you can control what you do, you know. Right. And, you know, for white people, it's, you know, when you understand what your place in that history has been, I mean, if you realize that, you know, you've been privileged or advantaged because of some of those abuses of some of your ancestors, then there's work that you can do to make that right. You know what I mean? You can use your privilege to help others in really meaningful ways. So it takes work, though, to be able to learn about that and to do that self-discovery. A lot of people want to deny that certain things are true about them or about their family because it's a real kind of strike to their ego. But I think it's important. And that's not happening in a school setting right now, you know? So wherever that needs to happen, you know, I'm not saying it only needs to happen in school. I'm just saying that schooling and education are separate, and your education is something that is this constant thing that's always kind of growing and developing. You know, some of my favorite rappers were homeschooled or had parents who were educators. You know, you look at Nas, right, who dropped out of school in the 8th grade, right? You look at Talib Kweli, whose mom was a school teacher and still is a college professor right now in New York. Even somebody like a Kanye West, you know, his mom was a teacher, you know, too. And you heard a lot of his early music kind of reflect a lot of the same values and mindsets. Then, you know, he lost his mom, and I think he lost some of his way when he joined this like billionaire class that's really disconnected from the rest of the world. You know, so I think that there's a lot of the education that's important. And I think that our kids need to own that, because the adults or the teachers in their lives may not know how to own that information or teach it in a way that's accurate.
Yeah. But like people, you start to see that they kind of need to go towards taking responsibility for their own education and kind of how their life ends up, and not letting, okay, like I have to follow a system and do what maybe other people have told me to do, because you don't know if that's gonna pan out for you in the long run. Yeah. Shay, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I'm going in and out, so I'm gonna leave you guys to it.
Okay.
But any soul messages before I leave?
Ooh, I'll tell you, like my elders told me recently, is dream big. Dream big. The goals that you have right now are not big enough. So go back, rethink them, then work towards that bigger idea.
Perfect timing with the spring solstice coming up. Perfect timing. Spring equinox, excuse me, spring equinox. All right, y'all. We have fun, and I can't wait to hear the interview and hear the rest of your music.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. One love. Peace, y'all.
Bye, Shay.
Peace.
Bye.
Yeah, no, I feel like that was a good for her to jump in really quick. I got to listen to a few of the songs that you had. Which one? The Art of Rap. Do you want to talk about? I mean, yeah. I really liked just like the music in the background, and then the message. So.
It's funny. So there's two stories I think that are really great about that song. One is the producer. He's from Providence, Rhode Island. His name is Lewis Morris, and we've probably met 2 times, maybe 3 times in life, in person. But we have over 35 songs together, which is wild to just think about. But a friend of mine introduced us, and it was just after I'd moved here to Sacramento, and I was starting to like get a little bit more serious about music. And Lewis sent me this like beat pack, and that was one of the ones that was in there, and I loved it. And the way that I write is like I can't just like sit down, and like dedicate time. I have to find myself writing while I'm in transit. So when I say like writing this, I'm on Broadway, back of the bus. I was literally on the back of the 51 coming down Broadway.
Oh, okay.
And like I hopped on the bus. I forget where I was, but I hopped on the bus. And by the time I hopped off the bus, that whole first verse was done.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. It was special. It was just like one of those things that like was supposed to happen that way. And then the other cool thing about that song is Avery's verse. And he goes by Ariel. And he is my partner in rhyme. That's the first feature I had ever gotten from any artist in Sacramento, was that verse on that song. And it took me a year to find this like open mic community, over at Soul Collective, which is an amazing kind of art and culture nonprofit in Sacramento. It's a real cultural hub. They used to all these open mics on Monday nights. And that's where I met all of these other kind of MCs and cool creative people. And Avery and I, we kind of hit it off right away. And I remember when I was working on the song, it's like, hey man, like, I don't have a third verse for this song. Like, would you be interested in like featuring on it? I think that you would really like it. It's kind of jazzy and hip hop. What do you think? And then he was like, yeah, man, like send it to me and then I'll do it. And he hit me up like the next day. It was like, yo, it's done.
Oh, wow.
But, like, yeah, like it hit him too in a really powerful way. So I think it's just a song that was filled with a lot of like fun and inspiration, and there's a couple of like like punchlines in there, or just like stuff about like having a good time. But whenever we perform that song, it gets the greatest like call and response thing. You know what I mean? We do like the hey ho hey, like the crowd goes nuts and they chant back the art of rap to us and the whole nine. So it's a great song. It's pretty lively, and I have a lot of fun with it.
Let me see if I can pull it up. Play it. So
there might be a video of us performing that a cappella on the bus.
Oh, do you on like YouTube? Would you want? Let me see if I can find.
I don't know if you can find it. That'd be cool. But I remember we were just like, we should do it. We should just do it and see what happens. And like the bus driver like heard us start going, and everybody was kind of into it. And the bus driver just like pulled over because he wanted to watch us perform. So it was pretty wild.
Let's see if I can find the.
I think we did it for National Guerrilla Poetry Month.
Okay, I see it. Yeah. Let me pull it up. What was it? Sorry, I'm like really close to the computer.
No, it's okay. But we would take poets with their pieces, and we would travel around the city to locations that matched the theme of their piece.
Yeah.
So with this particular one, because I talked about being on the bus, we were like, yo, let's go to the bus. Let's do it there.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
That's cool. Okay, I'm going to
find your spark, and that can happen anywhere because art will be art. Man, where's my 250? Gotta find my bus pass. Right in this, I'm on Broadway, back of the bus, backing me up, people laughing, passing a blunt, passing me up, hold the smoke, I don't partake, beats blasting from my phone to which they can relate, the flow escapes, even these strangers must acknowledge it, I tell them who the prophet is and they ask for my accomplishments, with confidence I rap stories of my life, compliments to my confidants, I've engaged without the mic, I told my story through the night, must have done something right, because I got interrupted so they could say I'm nice, and little shorty started breaking whenever there was a twist, and it went a little something like this. He froze, arm pointed down, then he pushed his hand around, hit himself on the head, we thought he was dead. Then he pulled himself off the ground, hit the clap and turned around and pressed. We asked him to do it again. It's the art of rap, oh! It's the art of rap, hey! It's the art of rap, oh! It's the art of rap, hey! I said, lyrically I'm wittier than Walt Whitman, not tripping over alliteration or diction. The truth in nonfiction is that figurative tales tell us more about ourselves and how we do something well. Oh well. I mean, science and compliance is multisyllabic. You're kidding me. Metaphors fall from average, A plus similes, you feeling me? I'm sharp as a tack. Found at the bottom of a haystack, I make it a point to stick out wherever you find me at. Still not getting the picture? I'll hang in it with ya. Upside down at the Sistine, critiquing Michelangelo. No GHT. You want to battle low Wi-Fi? Why try to take flight? I'm over your head. Overwhelmed because there was no way for you to prep when the dollar's back on nothing and you put it on your rep. While I peruse the avenues amused by substance, you'll still be deciphering this rhyme that I came up with. It's the art of rap. Oh! It's the art of rap. Hey! It's the art of rap. Oh! It's the art of rap. Hey! Me and the homies chilling up inside of the kickback. Open the six-pack, room smell like booze in the zigzag. Yo, but this shit whack, we already know how to fix that. They like, yo, spit that, show this party just where you live at. So I kick that funky shit, rhymes being needed for tic-tac. Jaws dropping like they ready to go swallow a Big Mac. You know I kick back, silly you, yo, where you been at? I'm the talk of the town, I'm the city's own chit-chat. So I give them a break down, something like Kit Kat, telling me who I am. Ariel should've shown up in gift wrap, cause I'm so special. I'm the streets of these girls and fellas, so many styles, I'm rocking like however they yelling. Tricky flow, Penn and Teller, Ninja flow, Donatello. You should kill a Wheezy beat, or you should do it a cappella. Whether it's off the phone or off of the cerebellum, it's the art of rap. I just impress them with my collection. It's the art of rap. Ho! It's the art of rap. Hey! It's the art of rap. Ho! It's the art of rap. Hey! It's the art of rap. Ho! It's the art of rap. Hey! What up? We're ZFG. Who's next? It's the art is the rap.
That is cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So when I walked up to the front of the bus, it's because the bus driver had like called me to the front, and he was like, "How long are y'all gonna keep going? Because I want to watch." So like I missed my cue on one of the lyrics, like where I was going back and forth with him. But it's amazing, and Ariel, he's just an amazing artist himself. He actually wrote a young adult superhero novel to help kids who are dealing with like depression and mental illness and all of that kind of stuff. So he wrote the book. He's got an album that's paired with it and a comic book that just came out last year. So he's super dope, and that whole project is called Heroic, and we're working on a hip hop musical version of that where he plays like the main character in the story, and I play like the old man master teacher figure in his life. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's so you guys like have more. It's cool when you have people that you can kind of like work with, and you kind of they fit into yours, art, and then you fit into theirs. It's always nice to be in that group. With that, how did you find the people that you work best with or that you can collaborate with, and even new people you might want to work with in the future? What is your key identifiers to be like, this is a person I can make?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that mainly we have to like align in like values and like how we treat people, right? Like a big thing for me is respect, but even more than that, like, do you care about like the world and what's happening around you? And if you do, then you're probably like my kind of person, right? It's hard when I see people who try to be like really divisive, and who like want to disrespect people or think that that's cool. Like that was never cool for me. You know what I mean? Like, one, because growing up you get stepped to. Like if you talk trash to the wrong person, the wrong time, wrong day, you're gonna have to run this fade. But growing up, what I realized and understood is that when you treat people well, and not just like how you want to be treated, but when you treat people well, even when they don't deserve it, that comes back like tenfold. Like you don't know who's watching, you don't know who owns like what types of relationships. So you just never know how handling a situation in the right way could then come back to you. Whether or not you feel like that person deserves it or not, is not the point. It's always like, you can't control what other people are doing, but you can control how you respond to that stuff. So, I met a bunch of artists through open mics, and I just really kind of listened and leaned into what they were saying through their art. And if I thought it was meaningful, I'm like, man, like that sounds like somebody I want to connect with. And then when I approach them and like we'll want to have a conversation, based on, I think, just their response and how they not just treat me, but how they treat other people, who want their time and attention. Like you can tell a lot from a person's character, by how they treat people who like don't mean anything to them, so when people are kind to those folks, I'm like, okay, like you're a decent human being, you're a talented artist, you're somebody I want to build with. And if we share some of the same values in terms of like social justice or education or hip hop or whatever, then we can build something really cool together. So I think that's really how my group of friends came together. We were really kind of sparked by us having to change the location of the open mic. We kind of outgrew Soul Collective. We had like 85 people there for an open mic every week, and it was a lot. So we started to kind of take it around town, but we found a lot of places that weren't really open to hip hop.
Okay.
So it was crazy to kind of have those conversations, but then to see just this like group of artists really rally around us as hip hop artists who were like, well, if you're not open to hip hop, we're not coming back to you. We're just going to show you that hip hop can be good for business and we're going to take this whole experience somewhere else. You know, we're not going to like undercut, we're not going to sidestep the issue. Like if you're racist, then we're not messing with you. So that was really awesome to see that, you know, there were like 80 people who had our back on that particular issue. And these were people who weren't hip hop artists at all. Like some of them were, but people who were, you know, rock and roll, punk, acoustic singer-songwriters, poets, who were just like, you know, if you don't like these folks and the art that they're creating, then you don't get our art either, right? So we would go to like Slice of Broadway or Jimmy's Hair Garage. We ended up at La Garnacha, which is like a taco stand with 150 people and like tubas and, you know, trombones and like all this wild stuff, and just hitting just different street corners to show people that, you know, this really eclectic gathering of people can really kind of make a difference, right? And then we started to shift that conversation a lot. So I think that process really kind of showed me people's real character and what they valued and what they felt like was right and decent and fair. So that was a pretty cool way to build community with folks pretty early in my experience here in Sac.
Yeah, that's a good that's a good way to do it, especially like having people, when you said the kindness factor, just like having humanity, that's in general, just being a good person.
Rappers want to be so hard though, right? They want to be so tough, so gangster. I'm just like,
yeah, but there's a time and place.
Like,
There's a time and place, you know. If you're walking with your grandma, you don't need to.
You know, exactly. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, like my music is not for your like after 9 p.m. You're trying to go out to the club or whatever. Right. But I'm definitely your 9 to 5. You know what I mean? Like
while you're thinking and
throw me on in your classroom, share me with your tias, your tios, your abuelas, right? Like you can, you know what I mean? Like you could play me at your family functions. But if it's like, yo, I'm trying to go and turn up, like turn me off. That's fine. That's cool. Like play whoever you want to play. Like,
right.
You know.
Yeah. Everyone has like a time and space where they fit in. What would you say, like, if you had to maybe describe your music, how would you describe it?
So it's definitely this like mix of hip hop and spoken word. You know, I'd like to think of my audience as like ages 5 to 95. So like that's not helpful for like most folks.
No, that's fine.
But but it really is though. And you know, when I get compared to other artists, people talk about like Common and Talib Kweli and Mos Def and Black Thought. Those are a lot of the comparisons that I get. And those are a lot of the people who inspire me as an artist. So I'm honored whenever people do that. But it's very hip hop, it's very musical, and jazzy. And, you know, I think in the more recent years, it's definitely become more soulful as I've worked with more singers. And, you know, I don't get a chance to really perform a ton because like the bar and club scene is like not my thing. I'll go out, but you know, I don't drink, I don't smoke. So for me, like if I'm going out, it has to be music related, really, or else I'm like just there in a club around a whole bunch of people.
Like, why am I here?
Turning up, you know. And I don't judge people for doing what they do. Like go out, have a good time, dance, like do your thing, and just be responsible. Like get home safe. But for me, it's like, you know, when I perform, I like to perform and then introduce some other elements to add kind of more meaning or to give people just a look that they wouldn't have thought of when they think of hip hop artists. So I like to incorporate dancers into my performance. So, you know, if you know, imagine like a crump dancer over like me rapping on a piano. You know what I mean? Like just like real different elements and have those things come together. A couple years ago, I performed with the Sacramento Ballet. They have an offshoot kind of project during the summer called Capital Dance Project. And it's kind of like the dancers like off season when they're not like working for the company, but they still want to do some good stuff. So they were collaborating with a bunch of artists in the city, and they choreographed like 10 minutes of ballet to my music. And I got to be up on stage with them and like rap while they were doing ballet, like around me and like all that kind of stuff. It was cool. You know, so it's stuff like that, you know, when I perform, you know, with the live band, it's an amazing time. But I try to provide experiences that are just like not your typical, like one person throw the beat on sort of deal. You know, I want to bring some more live elements to it.
I got you. Yeah, because you have the band and everything. What is necessarily like business wise? Like, what is your mindset on business?
You know, it's really interesting. I've always felt like my music is my business card. It's like how a lot of people get a chance to meet me and really understand some of the things that I'm about. And then the conversations get deeper when they realize they're like, oh, like you do music, but this isn't like what you do full time. Like you do this and you're really good at it. You probably could do this full time, but you have this like career in like education, youth development, working in nonprofits, putting together events and doing all this stuff. Let's talk to you about that, you know, and that's been pretty cool. About a year and a half ago, I started my consulting business around diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. And, you know, that's been like really cool to see some of those conversations. I'll give you a quick story of an example of some of that work. Back in 2014, when we were hopping around to different places, there was a shooting after a Nipsey Hussle concert. Ooh. And it wasn't related to the concert at all. It was a completely like separate thing in a parking lot that was like close by to the concert, but it was not like Nipsey. It wasn't his team. It wasn't nothing like that. Yeah. But the way that the papers wrote about it was like, yo, like all this stuff was connected, and it was like gang related and all this stuff. And it's like, y'all missed out. Like y'all missed the point. So we organized this protest, you know, to show people that hip hop artists in the city aren't just gang related artists, right? That there are hip hop artists in the city who are, you know, doing other forms of music, and, you know, folks need to recognize and appreciate that. One of the journalists who covered us, his name was Willis. He worked at the Sacramento Bee. And when we were getting harassed by the police, he like put us, you know, in the paper and helped to kind of advocate on our behalf, and, you know, to the city and stuff like that. And that was really dope. And that started in like 2014. Fast forward to 2019, you know, where we're thinking about diversity, we're thinking about inclusion, equity, all this stuff. What ends up happening, the paper does this audit where they realize that 85% of their stories, like the subjects of the stories and then the interview sources for their stories, were predominantly white men, you know, and they wanted to fix that. They wanted to change that. So we started this community to newsroom pipeline. And it wasn't just me, you know, it was Soul Collective, Andrew, you know, and Olivia Monahan, who became the editor at large for this community to newsroom pipeline program, which, you know, it wasn't, we're going to send a bunch of reporters into the community, cover the community. It was, we were able to get grant money to incentivize the community to write for the paper and tell their own stories in their own way, right?
Right.
And it was powerful. And then the pandemic hit, right? So it didn't stop people from writing. People still submitted stories, but when the pandemic hit, there was a huge kind of shift in focus. And then there were, you know, it seemed like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and the mob and like all this stuff was like happened. It was like 2-3 week span. There was all this stuff and building.
Yeah, like end of May, June, it was just doom doom.
It was rocket.
Yeah.
And I did a piece on race and equity, but particularly in the business community here in Sacramento. And I called out the Midtown Business Association for just their lack of diversity and representation on their board, and how they support Black owned businesses here in the city. And namely, this one particular business that was running a farmer's market, and they were trying to like kick them out of this event and opportunity that they basically built from the ground up. So I'd written about that, and the paper kind of knew I was interested in covering those kinds of things. So after the protests were happening, and like while I was going down, they hit me up and were like, hey, like, you know, you're doing this consulting work. You've written some really great stuff for us. Can you come and work with our journalists and editors on, you know, how to be more inclusive and fair in their journalism? So then I, you know, had a consulting contract with the Bee for 3 months, where like every other day I was working with journalists in small group settings, and we were literally like talking about their stories, who they were interviewing or thinking about interviewing, you know, what areas of the city that they were covering. I gave them a source list of over 200 really diverse people from different industries and backgrounds that they weren't already tapped into. And it was a way to kind of grow their coverage of these communities in a way that just made sense with their reporting on all levels. And, you know, I think that they're doing another source audit to kind of see the results of that work. But when we looked at like survey responses and things like that, there were journalists who said, I'm not going to write another story without a person of color in it, without a woman in my story, without somebody who represents the LGBTQ community in my story. Right. You know, there needs to be a better way to cover, you know, the issue of homelessness in our community. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like all of this stuff. And I was just like, man, this was a really powerful experience. And whether or not I go back, I know that like, I made a difference there in that space. And Olivia is still there as the editor in large for the Community to Newsroom pipeline. And they hired an equity team, right, with a Black woman as the editor for that team. And they cover the Black community, Latino community, and the Asian Pacific Islander community. And they have another reporter that's specifically working on equity stories for the Bee. You know, so it's amazing to kind of see some of those strides. But that's kind of the stuff that I do. There are other organizations and groups that I've worked with, like the Young Professionals Group through the Metro Chamber of Commerce, Metro Edge. You know, we've done work together. I did work with an engineering company called Tesco, where I was like working to train some of their, you know, managers who were managing for anywhere between like 10 to 25 or 30 plus years on the job. And now they've got these like younger, diverse, you know, employees. And it's like learning a new language around diversity and inclusion. So kind of giving them language and tools to then manage and lead effectively. So it's that kind of stuff that I get to do now, on top of like the music and community work and, you know, all of that. So for me, the music is a really cool way to say like, here's what I'm about. And if you like that, then you should see my other work. And then that's what typically happens.
Okay, that's really awesome. Like there's so many things that you're involved with. Seems like you're making a huge impact on your community and those around you. So you're like lifting people up with you, which is amazing. Something earlier that I wanted to ask you is, how was the shift or transition from East Coast to California? Like, how was that for you?
You know, it's interesting. I came out here with maybe like $60 in my pocket. I had moved my entire life like out of storage back home. But because I was working for City Year at the time, they really put up a lot of the money for the relocation stuff for my first month. Right. You know, which was amazing. It was a huge help. They put not just me, like the entire startup team, because we came out here to start up City Year chapter in Sacramento. And City Year is an AmeriCorps program. They place teams of volunteers in the schools to be tutors and mentors for students.
Right.
And they do that in like 30 cities around the United States. And they have a couple international sites that aren't AmeriCorps programs, but they get their funding from other sources. But we moved out here to start up, City Year here. So, they put us up in a hotel for a month. We were able to find a place within that amount of time. We were able to get our first like stipend check, and we were able to kind of talk to our landlord. We showed him like our proof of employment, all that stuff. But like once we got like settled, and I started to kind of dive deeper into like, who are my students? What kind of communities do they come from? Like, let me go out and explore Sacramento. I used to walk the grid in Midtown. Like I lived at 5th and T, and it's a 30 by 30 block grid for people who may not know that might be listening. So I used to walk to like different basketball courts or different locations, and I would try to find open mics. And I remember like walking into this one place like Fox and Goose, and they had an open mic, and it was like 4 old guys with beards. They were white dudes and banjos.
That's my brunch place. I don't really go there for those.
Right. Nobody goes really, like, so it was just them. They were just gonna like jam together, right? And they've been doing that for I don't know how long. But I came and I was like, can I like sign up? And they were like, yeah, sure. Like the only one here. So if you just want to perform, then go for it. Yeah. And they heard me do my thing, and they were like, you should go to Soul Collective. Not that we don't want you here, but we think that you'll find
that's the environment for you.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I don't know where this place Soul Collective is, but okay, sure. So I like stayed on the grid, and my buddy was trying to get to know Sacramento in a different way. He was on an OK Cupid date one day, and he asked me to come.
What year was this though?
This was easily 2013 or 2012 probably. Okay. So he was like, yo, like, I'm on this date and it's going terribly. She like invited all her friends, like, can you come and like bail me out? And I was like, sure. And I show up, but I like hit it off with like all of her friends who were all like cool and weird, like artist creative types.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, well, if you do poetry, you should go to Soul Collective. And I was like, okay, so the cool kids are saying Soul Collective. The like Willie Nelson banjo guys are saying Soul Collective. Like, let me actually go to this place.
Yes.
And when I walked in, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is really like where I need to be. And from showing up to open mics to volunteering at events for about 3 years, I joined their community advisory board, and now I sit on the executive board and have been for about 2 years. That really kind of helped with that transition, because for me, a lot of what I wanted to get connected to were like real people in the community, and I wanted to use art to help people, not just as like a distraction, but as like, hey, like if we can work on this political project through an artistic lens, then great, let's do that. Let's organize this event or a block party or, a campaign around this thing. Let's do all of that. So that was pretty cool, kind of getting to know people and integrating into the community. Kind of Soul Collective was one of the main ways that I met people. Open mics was another way. Doing shows was another way. And then my job was to help develop the branding and awareness for the organization for City Year. So a large part of my role was to go to neighborhood association meetings, city council, to meet with sponsors or potential sponsors. So a lot of that just required traveling around the city and asking
you were learning how to network.
Yeah, all of that. So that's really how I got to know a lot of people. And it's funny because you'll find people who are like, oh, I know you from like schools, right? Like you do
Yeah.
stuff in education and they have no clue that I do hip hop. And then
Yeah.
they see me get on the mic and they're like, what are you doing in school?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you have
They don't
gone to
like
school?
see that they combine and they work together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
I think
know
there was
folks
like
will.
that one, I don't know, I'm pretty sure it was a block party where you were performing with my dad.
Uh-huh.
And we like went and we saw it. And it was really good. Like they had like the face painting and you had people on stage and I think they had
Was this
dancers.
the Crocker block by block thing? Was it like by the library, the Colonial Heights Library?
I'm this is for me, I don't think so.
You
I
don't
don't even
remember?
because if it was like it wasn't downtown. It was
No, it wasn't. It was like closer to Stockton Boulevard.
yeah.
If that's the one, that one will forever live in my mind. All of the b-boys came out, all these dancers came out, and they just posted up in front of the stage and were waiting for us to get on stage because they had heard about us.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, oh my gosh, okay, let's see what's up. And somebody brought out the cardboard and like had like laid it down. So then they had this like dance area where like if folks wanted to
Wow.
get around to like head spin or whatever, and people were like grooving because the music was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But then they had like for real dancers who were like getting down, and that was such a good time.
Yeah, that was I had fun when I went, so I know like those are really good. I still remember it, so
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. Well, I don't have like any more questions. Is there anything else that you would like to say? Any like promos you want to like put out last
Watch my film or just book me. Like hit me up. My Instagram handle is Paul Willis is hip hop. And that's like my Facebook, my Cash App, my Venmo, my Gmail, all that stuff. But there's no middle manager with me, right? So nobody's like I don't front on people. You know, when they send me an email, if they send me something, you will get a genuine response and reply. But I'm trying to do more stuff with like museums and colleges and universities. And I have a workshop called Hip Hop is Fine Art, and in a 4-hour kind of virtual experience where we do the workshop, watch the film, hear the album, and we have this like Q&A networking meet and greet thing where people can ask me all the questions. I'll answer everything from like these like small details or stories in the music to like topics that come up in the film about gentrification or representation or my work as a consultant. Like it's a great way to kind of get to know me and to see hip hop in a different lens. So I'm willing to just connect with folks about opportunities like that. And I'm really excited about those types of opportunities. I think that if folks are in the area, and I don't know when the podcast will come out, so I'm kind of guessing here.
Yeah.
But they should definitely go check out the Sojourner Truth Museum on Florin Road by the African Marketplace. They are doing this like extension to the museum, so they're doing like this grand like reopening. So people might miss my band playing that event, but they should go see it because it's all these murals about like Black history and all this stuff. It's amazing. But that'll open Saturday, March 20th.
Okay.
And then people should go out and see that. I'm doing a birthday dinner and celebration where I'm screening the film at Dub Plate. We're doing like a drive-in kind of deal.
Okay.
It's not really a drive-in place, but they got a parking lot in the back. We're gonna set up a screen. We're gonna set up a projector. We'll have speakers, and people can come get a plate of Jamaican food and like watch the film and then ask me questions afterwards.
Nice.
So it'll be like safe and socially distanced, and people get to eat food and like come out for a little bit. So those are a couple of things, and that's March 28th. That's a Sunday. But outside of like those two things, there's nothing that's like super far ahead in the future right now. There's like stuff that's being like worked on right now. We're trying to nail dates down for, but if people want to know, they can stay in touch with me through social media, and I'll keep them posted as things come up.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.